Good morning, everybody, and welcome to this decision session. I am Councillor Pete Kilbane. I am the Executive Member for Economy and Transport, and we have a number of items before us today that we need to make a decision on. I'd like to, in particular, welcome all of the public speakers. We are expecting another public speaker to join us, so hopefully they will arrive before we get to the end of that process. Okay, item number one, declarations of interest. I have no interest to declare in terms of any of the business that's before us this morning. Item number two, happy to approve the minutes from the last decision session, and also happy to report that the decision on cashless parking and maintaining two car parks where people could pay cash was received well by those that need that facility, and also that the Acomb Front Street phase 2 consultation has proved incredibly popular with hundreds of people participating in that consultation so far. So very pleased to be moving forward with some level of agreement across the city in both of those areas. So yeah, happy to approve those minutes. Okay, we move on to public participation. We have a number of speakers here today, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 speakers to address us today, all of whom will be in person if Councillor Stewart arrives, which I'm expecting him to do any minute now. And the first person that we have is Mr. Andy de Gorn. If you would like to come up and give us 3 minutes worth of your thoughts, Mr. de Gorn, that would be greatly appreciated. Do you want a 30-second warning before? Okay, your time starts now.
Thank you. I'm sure the executive member is as deeply underwhelmed by this fraud of a People Street plan as I am. Last week, Living Streets Walking Summit revealed that South Yorkshire schools taking part in their walking challenge saw car use cut from 40% to 19% without any physical changes. Badger Hill School could sign up for the year for just £500 compared to 200 times what's proposed here. In the words of your own transport policy manager in Annex D, the junction near the school entrance looks more or less the same. Doesn't do much to discourage non-essential vehicles, seems to miss the point of what a school street is supposed to be. He goes on, forcing all parents and children onto narrow crossings will potentially create a big bottleneck. If through traffic could be removed, parents and children would be able to cross in any direction, as seems to be the case now. Your transport planner makes similar observations about the low fencing constraining and herding pedestrians away from the diagonal desire line with increased dominance for motor vehicles. I'd ask, has this new trip hazard been risk assessed? Why not zigzags on both sides of the junction instead of fencing? As yet, no comments from funders Active Travel England, but I doubt they would see this plan as achieving the objectives in paragraphs 2 to 4. In fact, many public responses express similar doubts. A weak scheme unlikely to achieve the stated aim. Weak and will have limited impact. Dangerous for cyclists in this area. Complete waste of money. The roadway outside the school entrance should be a raised table coloured red. Good idea. I can't see the proposals changing behaviour of parents causing the problem. I'm still quoting. A missed opportunity to remove school-run vehicles at the start and finish of the school day, if not completely with a point closure. A People Street outside school should allow emergency access only during that time. An ideal location with an obvious diversion route available on adjacent streets. Cyclists and pedestrians disadvantaged by the lack of ambition. So to finish, £35,000 out of 100,000 largely wasted already on work which failed to address the right questions, and other than establishing feasibility for minor ineffective measures that score critical fail for cycling. Yes, I did approve this work 18 months ago, but something must be seriously wrong for the scheme to reach this point, with transport staff in effect questioning the value of throwing good money after bad. Warning. This project should be deferred for at least a month to discuss with the school, Active Travel England, transport colleagues, and so on, taking account of scorings for the Clifton Green scheme. Hard choices might still need to be made, but at least please reflect deeply on the consultation outcome before wasting £100,000 on option 1. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. de Gorn, and you had 5 spare seconds at the end there, so great timing. Okay, next on my list, I have Andrew Mortimer. Mr. Mortimer, I think you've done this before. So would you like a 30-second warning? Okay. And your time starts now.
Thank you, Chairman. I want to speak about the active travel programme Badger Hill scheme. In reality, there doesn't seem to be much of a choice before you, as the available money only really allows but one option to go ahead. This option might make a difference, and I think on that basis you should go ahead and follow the officer's recommendations, but you need to consider a number of other issues as well. Firstly, a lot of the current traffic problems around Badger Hill Primary School are short-lived and happen around the school drop-off and pick-up times. Many of them are because selfish drivers in particular don't adhere to the current traffic regulation orders. Cars are parked regularly on double yellow lines, block driveways, and cause congestion by trying to get as close as possible to the school entrance. While this issue is mentioned in the report, there doesn't seem to be anything about enforcing the new arrangements. And without this, this is likely that some drivers will continue to park on yellow lines and block drives. And this will undermine the value of the scheme. If one driver gets away with breaking the rules, it won't be long before they're routinely ignored. I think, therefore, enforcement is essential. And as a minimum, there needs to be a high-profile enforcement of the scheme in the weeks after it goes live, and an ongoing commitment to report back on adherence to the new rules. Secondly, the report mentions that one of the main outcomes sought from the active travel scheme funding is to encourage more parents to walk or cycle their children to school. I don't see anything in the report that covers how this will be measured to see if the scheme delivers. There needs to be a baseline for the numbers currently walking or cycling to school, and further reports at, say, 6 and 18 months' time after the proposals are implemented, so they can see if these changes have been successful in achieving that objective. And finally, I've spoken to other local residents and asked that any new signage is not excessive and works at peak times. For instance, it's no use having new road markings that can't be seen because cars are parked on top of them, and that happens a lot of the road at those peak school times. Also, the material and design of the new bollards and fences should sit well in the local streetscape, and there should be a plan for onward maintenance so that they don't become an eyesore. Thank you.
Oh, sorry. What was the last phrase? Because I spoke over you.
Sorry. So also the material and design of the new bollards and fences should sit well in the local streetscape, and there should be a plan for onward maintenance so that it don't become an eyesore.
Okay, thank you very much. Next up, we have Councillor Fenton. Councillor Fenton, will you require a 30-second warning?
Go on.
Yeah, well, everybody else has been well within time, just say. Okay.
Thank you, Chair. I'm speaking in relation to the agenda item on access control barriers. Very much welcome the report on an issue which I know is of keen interest to many residents, not least those who cycle and use mobility scooters and have to navigate the wide variety of access controls currently in place across the city. As we know, this work has been ongoing for some time, and looking back through old emails, in March 2022, there was a call from officers for councillors to nominate priority locations where barriers could be removed or adapted. There were then workshop discussions in February 2023, which unfortunately I wasn't able to attend. One of the locations I suggested in 2022, we'd previously commissioned back in 2019 a new design of an access barrier. This was in response to feedback from residents that they were unable to use a route to school because if you had a child seat on the back of the bicycle, you could limbo the bicycle to a certain extent to get under the barrier, but with a child in the seat, it was dangerous and fraught. I do understand why officers at the time felt that rather than take forward individual measures, they wanted a citywide consistent approach, and that's entirely understandable. And I do welcome the additional funds that have been put into this programme in addition to the funds that had previously been allocated by the previous administration. And there does seem to be unusually a general consensus on the need for action on this. The report is right to highlight challenges that will and have occurred. I know from experience of sites such as Hob Moor, where there were barriers in place to reduce the risk of motorcycle incursions. We've come through the other side of that. The restrictive foot plinths were removed. There has been anecdotally an increase in motorcycle incursion, but that tends to be motorcycle incursion with a view to setting the motorcycles on fire. They've been relatively infrequent, but it is good to see that there's a commitment in the report to properly evaluate the impacts of measures, because at the moment it's does tend to be anecdotal. It's recommended to establish a stakeholder advisory panel. That's a good idea. It would be helpful to have clarity in due course on the membership of the panel and what opportunities there will be for elected members to input. Finally, I am sure other members receive complaints about inaccessible infrastructure on private land, such as stiles, and I appreciate this work is focused on council assets, although it would be good if we could share learning and best practice with private landowners so that they can hopefully implement similar measures on their land.
Thank you, Councillor Fenton. Perfectly timed as well. Thank you. And next on my list, I have John Pybus, who I've seen arrive. So welcome, John. Not at all. You've only got 3 minutes, and I'll give you a 30-second warning towards the end, if that's okay. Okay. All right. Over to you.
So I'm here to speak on the pedestrianisation of Fossgate. There has been a report from the officers.
John, can you just turn your mic on? We'll start again on your time. Okay.
There we go. Yes, so here to speak on the pedestrianisation of Fossgate. There was a report written by officers that wasn't communicated to anyone that wrote the petition. Instead, it was communicated to the York Press, who got in touch with us. And I'd just like to go through a few parts of that report and speak on them. First of all, the financial implications that the report talks about are incredibly short-sighted. The report only talks about the costs to the council. It doesn't talk about the increased revenue from business rates, which will happen if the street was pedestrianised. Secondly, we've been asking for consultations throughout this entire process. We understand that we are not everyone on the street. There are residents and other businesses involved. And the report says that we've already done consultations, so we're not going to do any more. However, these consultations are old. They're 2017, 2018. Things have changed since then. Half the businesses on the street have got new tenants. We've had COVID, where people got very used to cafe culture, and Russia went and invaded Ukraine. So before the invasion of Ukraine, our energy bills were very, very manageable. These days, we are literally paying for the heating in winter with the outdoor pavement license in the summer. So if you take those away, things are not going to be very good for us. So to say that we've already had consultations, which are 6-7 years old, it's a little bit cheeky, to be honest. The other thing the report does not mention at all is cleaner air. There was 3 parts of a petition. It was cafe culture, improved disability access, and cleaner air. For some reason, cleaner air has been completely left out of the report, and I'd like to know why. We also believe that the option E for the market days is a little bit of a piecemeal compromise, really. We're going to have to set up barriers at both ends of the street, employ security and stewarding. For us small businesses, it is absolutely untenable. And so option E being floated as a compromise really isn't the case. And lastly, we've got 1,700 signatures and counting on a petition. The people, the citizens, the electorate wanted something to happen, and we went about it the right way. We got in touch with our Guildhall councillors. All 3 of them said they were in full support. We then launched a petition. We then handed that petition in. That petition was then given to full council, and we've gone through a democratic process. It's the people and the people that they elect However, in between the people and the people they elect are unelected council officers. And
30
these,
seconds.
these officers seem to be the people that are driving the decision making. So I've spoken to a lot of councillors. I've spoken to obviously to our Guildhall councillors. It's within the Labour strategy to have improved disability access and to have cleaner air. So I would urge you today to please vote with the electorate and not with the unelected council officers. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, John. And next on my list, I have Anthony Brennan. Mr. Brennan. Yeah, Mr. Brennan, have you done this before?
No, first time.
Okay, you've seen what's been happening.
Yeah, I have.
You've essentially got 3 minutes to get all your points across, and I'll give you a 30-second warning so that you know when you come to a close.
Yeah, okay.
And if you run over a few seconds, then that's fine, because everybody else has been shorter. So over to you.
Okay. Well, ladies and gentlemen, and our esteemed decision makers here today, as you know, we're all dedicated Yorkies and want the best for our beautiful historical city. But you, the people here today, you're the architects of our city's future. And we're gathered today to discuss the exciting prospect of pedestrianising Fossgate. And I'm reminded once again of the collective brilliance here among this team, the people in this room. Each of you brings to the table a unique blend of pragmatism and vision, propelling our city towards a future that is both sustainable and vibrant. Now, when it comes to pedestrianisation, I understand there may be concerns about disrupting the flow of the traffic, but let me assure you, Fossgate isn't just any street. It's a vibrant hub of culture, commerce, and community. And by pedestrianising it during popular daytime hours, we're not just reducing traffic, we're enhancing the very essence of what makes Fossgate and the City of York so special. So if you picture families leisurely strolling along cobbled streets, friends gathering at outdoor cafes to soak up the sunshine, like today, and this is the York that we know and love, and the city that thrives not just on commerce, but on connection. So, my esteemed colleagues, let us seize this opportunity to further enhance the charm and allure of our beloved city. Let us be the architects of a York that prioritises people over traffic, community over congestion, and sustainability over status quo. So in conclusion, let us embark on this journey towards a pedestrianised Fossgate with optimism, enthusiasm, and a shared sense of purpose. For in doing so, we are not just shaping the future of York, but we're creating a legacy that will endure for generations to come. And when the annals of history recount the great strides made by this city, it can be known that it was the boldness and brilliance of these decision makers here today that set us on this path to greatness. Thank you, and may our footsteps pave the way to a greener and more pedestrian-friendly York. Thank you.
Thank you, Anthony, flattery will get you everywhere. You've no idea how unusual it is to hear such words in public participation. So thank you for that.
Thank you.
Next up, we have Sarah Lakin. Sarah, you've seen what's happening. So there's 3 minutes, and I'll give you a 30-second warning towards the end. So in your own time, over to you.
Thank you. Hi, Sarah Lakin. I'm at Fossgate Social. So this is in support of the pedestrianisation of Fossgate. We think there's three main parts to this desire. One is to strengthen community, as the previous speaker said. We started the Fossgate Festival as a response to the Boxing Day flooding of 2015. And it was to show that we'd survived flooding. We've had to survive quite a few things since then. It's been an interesting decade. But people keep asking us, when are we going to do the festival again? And I think it was just the community vibe you got out of removing the traffic for a whole day so people could spread into the street. And we think our questionnaire bears this out, that people still have a desire to put folks before cars. This still resonates, and people do support cafe culture where you can sit outdoors and socialise. This also fits in with what they're calling experiential retail. I don't think you can just go uptown, buy the thing and go home anymore. Apparently stuff has to happen to you. The next thing was about accessibility. None of this works if it's not entirely inclusive. And we believe pedestrianisation of Fossgate, this isn't just the removal of cars, it's the raising of the roadway to be flush with the footway. This will increase accessibility and safety. There was a consultation quote I found on the internet from City of York Council. Forgive me, I don't know exactly when it was. I think it was one of the blue badge iterations. And it says, quote, many blind and partially sighted people, for example, approve of the extended pedestrian zones. They say it makes walking through town much easier and means they do not have to worry about traffic. But there has been an issue with visually impaired journeys and blue badge access. I think possibly the reaction to COVID and the central government sort of massive blanket rulings has made people upset about being sort of banned from their city. But we believe with good design and working together and positivity, that a lot of these issues can be mitigated. For instance, boring, but directional corduroy tactile paving. This is a sort of ridged paving, and this helps with people with mobility canes to read the edges of surfaces. So you don't need a curb edge. Raising the table to be, road table to be flush with the footway. This promotes safety because instead of people in wheelchairs searching for drop curbs, they can travel at will wherever they want.
30 seconds.
Then finally, I'm going to go on about pollution. You've probably all read about the ULEZ positive results. It's not that we're suggesting, this is London, we're not suggesting that we become a ULEZ, but we're trying to illustrate how toxic traffic is. You can look up the figures of how many adults die prematurely due to particulate matter pollution. And in 2019, York City Council declared a climate emergency. And I think removing cars, reducing cars and putting people forward would be a good beginning to that.
Perfect timing.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. And our final speaker, last but by no means least, we have Councillor Stewart. Councillor, I think you know the drill by now. Do you want a 30-second warning?
You'd best, because as you said last night, I can ramble on a bit like you, so yeah.
Okay, 3 minutes and counting.
Thank you very much, Chair. I'm speaking about item 6, the Bishopthorpe Bridge, what I'll refer to as closure, but obviously the weight restrictions that have been put on. It's had a massive impact on Cottonthorpe, which I represent, obviously, as people will be aware, with vehicles that would have gone ordinarily through Bishopthorpe, now through Cottonthorpe and Appleton Roebuck. And for me, it still remains surreal seeing the size of these vehicles that are coming through the village. And I'm really concerned about two particular areas, which is sort of junctions within the village, Station Road, Main Street and School Lane, Manor Heath, which are a real problem. And Drone Road, Temple Lane area, where there's no path on the pavement. I would like to thank officers who, for their engagement with me. I'm very grateful for that. I think things are still moving slower than I'd like, but for me, it's not just about getting the traffic back through Bishopthorpe, which I believe is a far safer route. I genuinely believe that. It's about addressing this long-term issue of these heavy vehicles should not be at that airfield. They should be near motorways where the norm would be, rather than going through villages. So that's the the sort of key thing I want to address in the medium term. I do welcome the report, and I would assume and hope you will choose option 5 to repair the bridge. The costs for traffic lights seem eye-watering. Amazed at how high those can be. I don't think you'll be going that route, and I don't think any other sort of leaving the problem unsorted are likely to make sense. But I do hope you'll go for option 5, and I would welcome that. I just want to put on record sort of 3, and sorry, just one point. I'm very disappointed in the report. It refers to the establishing ownership of the bridge. It obviously talks about establishing ownership as well as who's responsible. Is it the bridge owner or is it the highway authority? But it does seem we still haven't technically established that the bridge is definitely owned by Sustrans. So in sort of 6 months, that should have been bottled out by now, then who the liability is. 3 particular things I'd like to see, hopefully, if we get in addition to the bridge work being done, is the village would love to have a VAS, vehicle activated sign about the speed in Temple Lane. And that's something that's been progressed with officers. I'm not aware of any particular delays on that. There is a process, but also the village is likely to be happy to pay for that in full. The parish council, me as ward councillor, so there should be no financial threats to that. So really, if you could, as executive members, say you'd like to see as much happen on that as soon as possible. And secondly, on the Temple Lane area, getting some more road markings to say slow. We can't have 30-mile-an-hour repeater signs, but we can have slow road markings. And the third thing is to urge in the interim that we reopen the bridge to one side going away or from Bishopthorpe to heavy vehicles to halve the flow through Coplandthorpe. I appreciate that's not ideal, but for me, that would make sense. It would be entirely professional drivers, you know, lorries, other similarly large vehicles, and I believe it would be absolutely respected, and it would halve the number of vehicles that are in a profoundly dangerous position. And I think if we could do that, I'd welcome that. Thank you very much, Chair.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Stewart. And thank you, everybody, for your contributions today. I will try and address as many of those points that you've all raised as I can when we come to the decisions on each of the individual items. Okay, so yeah, no, thanks once again. It is greatly appreciated. Okay, so from all of those issues, the first item that we have on the agenda is the active travel programme at Badger Hill. So that's agenda item 4. If you want to catch up on the decision, it'll be on the YouTube later on. Okay, all right. Thanks very much. Okay, you'll have to be in suspense until then, I guess. Okay, so the first decision in front of us is to do with the active travel programme in Badger Hill. James, are you going to take the lead off on this one?
I can very quickly introduce it and pass to Christian for the detail.
Sure.
Yes, this is one of the active travel schemes funded by Active Travel England. We've previously agreed a scope and for this report. The designs before you are purely feasibility. The next stage is to move into the detailed design and delivery. I'll hand over to Christian to talk you through.
I'll briefly summarise the report and I'll provide a bit of input relating to the public speakers.
Sure.
The aim of the scheme is to improve safety for pedestrians and cyclists, especially around school drop-off times. It's to reduce the impact of traffic, for example, parking on verges, and by doing that, to encourage modal shift towards walking and cycling as per our objectives in the council plan. The proposal, the main changes consist of introduction of bollards to prevent parking on the verge, low-level fencing to encourage pedestrians to cross at the designated crossing points, cycle markings, 2D speed tables and additional signage, and some tree planting to improve amenity. We've undertaken a consultation with local ward councillors, residents, parents and staff from the local school and local interest groups. The key takeaways from the consultation: 44% of respondents said that the current conditions are fair or poor for pedestrians. 53% said the current conditions are fair or poor for cyclists. Between 50 to 70% of respondents agreed that the proposals would encourage them to walk or cycle more often, which I think is an important thing to take away from the consultation. 49% of respondents said that they would personally benefit from the proposals. 17% said that they believe they would be negatively affected by the proposals. We have had a session with Active Travel England to talk about the scheme specifically. They're not yet in a position to provide any formal written response, but I'm confident that there is nothing that they will come back to us with that is not already represented within this report, but I can't speak for Active Travel England. The costs, as laid out in the report, current cost estimates are £116,000. That's out of a shared £200,000 pot with a similar scheme at Clifton Green that is not as far progressed. Those costs come from the £200,000 grant from Active Travel England. The next stage would be detailed design, so those cost estimates may change, but we are at a point of being fairly confident in those costs. With regards to an LTN 120 assessment of the proposals, the scheme is an improvement. The score does come out higher. Some people have pointed out that there is a line on the assessment that shows a critical fail. So to briefly address that, the critical fail relates to speeds on Field Lane at the edge of the proposed scheme. The assessment considers the whole route through the area. And the potential solution to remove that critical fail would be to install a signalised crossing point on Field Lane. That's not proposed as part of this scheme. as it's not currently affordable. But that's why that critical fail is in there. However, as I say, overall, the scheme is measured as an improvement as well as having that positive consultation feedback. Input with regards to the speakers' representations. I'm hearing a desire to do more, to be more ambitious. That's again a very understandable point of view. I would say, is this an improvement? Is this something we can afford and do now? I believe it is. There was a representation with regards to enforcement, a suggestion that we could perhaps tie up the implementation of the scheme with some increased enforcement. I think that's a sensible idea. I'll explore it. There's possibly also something we can do there about communication about the existing methods for people to call out enforcement as and when they see incidents. So we'll look into that. There was a point made about how to measure success of the scheme after it's been implemented. I believe one of the ways we can do that is to ask the same questions we've asked as part of the initial consultation and see if people believe that it has positively affected them. There was a query about considering the materials of the bollards. We'll absolutely do that in the detailed design stage. There's been some discussions about the potential to perhaps use planters instead of bollards. We're not at a point where we can say we will do that, but we will definitely explore that in the detailed design stage.
Okay, great. Thank you. And thanks, Christian, and thanks for all your work and the officers' work on this report. Just in terms of the public speakers, I do find it absolutely gobsmacking that the person who commissioned this work and got it to this stage then turns up at a public meeting and criticises the work that they themselves had commissioned, and then calls for a deferral of the decision, which is, I think, symptomatic of the way that transport was run under the previous administration, with decisions being put off, kicked into the long grass, chopping and changing going on, which meant that hardly anything of any measure was completed. I think there is an acknowledgement that this is not the absolutely ideal scheme, but it is something that we can deliver with the money that we have got. So I'll be happy to support that we crack on and deliver this scheme for the residents of Badger Hill and for the parents and children who attend the school. I think some good points were raised by Mr. Mortimer in terms of enforcement. We have applied for greater enforcement powers as a local authority, which local authorities are entitled to use these days. We're waiting for the government to lay the order that gives us those powers, and we've been waiting for quite some considerable time at the moment. But this particular government seems to be quite slow when it comes to taking actions that will have any impact at all upon drivers. And I think that kind of brings us to the core of the issue, really. I think, and as has been said from the responses from the public, you know, this is mainly what happens around about the peak times for pick up and drop off, isn't it? So, you know, when I was looking at this report and thinking about this issue in general, yes, there are fails in terms of the analysis, but those fails are to do with the wider scope. And I think what we need to do as an authority and the direction that is now coming from this administration is to always look at the wider picture, and that's partly what our well, it is entirely what our local transport plan will do. So we need to look at these things in the round so that we're not just looking at isolated projects, which I think has happened under previous direction, because we need to see how this all connects up. So, you know, we need to understand why parents are driving their kids to school. So I remember, you know, I think many of us in this room, he looks around to see who's of a certain age and realizes he's one of the oldest in the room, but there you go. When we started our junior schools, then you just walked to school, you know, and you would do that. I'd walk a mile or so to school, and that is just not done these days. And the reason that that is not done is because parents are frightened of their kids being run over. And until we start to tackle that, then we're going to be stuck in this position. So you know, you've got to ask, as a society, you know, what the hell have we done that have made it unsafe for a 10 or 11-year-old to go to school on their own? You know, because we're the ones who are doing it in our cars. You know, what the hell? We've literally driven our kids off the road. So we have to take them there in this metal case to protect them. Not all kids, of course, and some kids are still walking and cycling to walk, and that's great. What we need to do is encourage more of that, but we need to do that in a joined up fashion that, one, enables people to do that, and two, discourages people from using the car if they don't have to. And that is the aim, and that's not only what I'm reading in some of the feedback on this particular project, but that is what's coming through in the public consultation for the local transport strategy, is that people want the opportunity to use sustainable methods of getting to wherever they're getting, but especially getting kids to and from school. So I think happy to support the recommendation. I think as well as in terms of the measurement, we've got a sort of a baseline from the survey that's been done for this particular report, and we can revisit that, as Christian says, to see how people's attitudes have changed once the scheme's been implemented. It would be great if we could do a more scientific measurement, but that then becomes an issue of cash. Not the one that we've got scientific, but if we established a baseline and we had good marker points that would stand the test over time, that would be great. But as you might be aware, the authority is absolutely strapped for cash. Trying to deliver these schemes with what's been going on with inflation is difficult enough as it is, and getting the money to do a detailed measurement would be very, very difficult. But we'll see. We'll kind of see what we can do on that, because it would be very useful to know. But I do get the feeling with all of these schemes that unless we think of it in the whole as to how people are moving around, not just in this particular area, then we're not going to tackle a problem unless we use the big stick of enforcement, if the government gives us the powers to do that. So yes, it's a step. Thank you very much for all the work that's gone on to it. It's definitely a step in the right direction. But we loudly hear the call that we need to do more, and we're very happy to see how much more we can do. Okay, so happy to approve the recommendation on page 8, paragraph 9. Okay, thank you. Okay, and the next item that I have on the agenda is agenda item number 5, the access control barrier review.
Thanks, Chair. So just to clarify, this is about restrictions that have been put in with the best of intentions across the city over many decades. And I think in essence, what we're doing is we're retrospectively reviewing those in the context of each principles in the council plan and the public sector equalities duty, which didn't exist prior to 2011 when many of these were put in. So I'll hand over to Greg in just a second, but the team have worked hard with stakeholders and across the city to identify these locations, developed a detailed policy, which is an annex, and set out an approach of how we'll prioritise the locations that we'll tackle in the rolling programme that full council have funded through the budget process. Over to Greg.
The report put forward for the exec member has summarised the fundings of the asset control barrier review, which was undertaken in 2023 by Transport Initiatives on behalf of the council. For clarification, the type of barriers included in the review are those which specifically affect the routes of pedestrians, wheelers, wheelchair users and cyclists, but not those which are related to motor vehicle access or parking. The report requests adoption of the policies recommended by that review as a council policy going forwards. This will enable barriers to be removed or altered through standardised designs which are compliant with current guidance, which will in turn make the active travel network more accessible. Officers will then be able to disseminate the policy as guidance to internal council departments and external agencies or developers who may also be considering the removal, redesign or introduction of barriers. The final part of the review puts forward a proposal for prioritisation of the hundreds of non-compliant barriers across the City of York in order that they be dealt with in a phased manner. A stakeholder advisory panel is proposed to be set up to undertake that prioritisation.
Great. So thank you, Greg. Very pleased to see this report. come before this decision session. I think as Councillor Fenton alluded to, it's been a long time in the making. There's been a great deal of talk around this issue over the past few years, and then a great deal of work done by the team, and particular thanks to Greg and Andy for all the work that you've done on this, along with others, to actually get us to a position where we can, in a systematic way, start to tackle the hundreds of barriers that have been found around the city. I have to say that I think it is a source of some shame that it took action by somebody trying to assert the equality rights that's led to the removal of some of the barriers in the first instance. Slightly disappointed to hear there's been some motorcycle incursions onto Hobmore, but on the plus side, there's been no cow excursions of late. So, you know, there's something is going right there. I've got to say, I was once trying to get across Hobmore, and I had a bike and I had kids on the bike as well, and trying to get through those old barriers was a disaster. And then as I was kind of working out what I was going to have to do to get the kids and the bike and everybody through the barriers, a motorcycle came over Hobmore and started heading straight towards me, and I was there kind of going. Anyway, the person then got off the motorbike, took out their radar key and opened the door for me and said, "Does that help?" And I had to say, "Thank you very much," and then continued on my way. So there are issues that need to be addressed, and I think coming up with a standard that works, that allows access while also controlling, you know, making sure the cows can't wander everywhere as well, and trying to make sure that we don't have an upsurge in antisocial behaviour is quite a tricky task. And, you know, it's been set about with great gusto, and we've seen some really good results in this report. I do want to mention, because I've already mentioned in terms of measurements and evaluation of these schemes, that given that the council, like many other councils, has very limited resources, so to pay for those kind of measurement schemes is almost impossible from our revenue budgets. That I want to really thank the academics at the University of Westminster, who have offered to free of charge to us, who have offered to evaluate this scheme. So during the first year of the scheme being implemented, they will evaluate a current route before any changes happen. And then the change will happen to that route, and they'll evaluate it for the year after that. So we'll have some really good scientific data as to whether or not there is actual upsurge in motorbike incursions, etc. So we'll set about making sure that there's a suitable route for them to work on. We will prioritise the route. So I think we've put about £200,000 a year into the budget for this over the next 5 years. We will prioritise the routes so that we tackle the ones first that cause the most problems for people who need to access the route. So we will be making sure that we do start to deal with that unlawful discrimination that unfortunately was happening, and we will also make sure that we're tackling the routes that are on those sort of core networks that people need to use, because obviously it then opens up the routes for people to use sustainable methods of transport. So very pleased to see this report coming before me. Very pleased to announce that we're finally going to see some action on these barriers, and in a very structured way. And I think the suggestion that we should share our learnings with private landowners is a really good suggestion, because it will be good to start tackling some of those barriers in partnership with private landowners wherever we can. So happy to approve the recommendations on page 114, paragraph 21, recommendations A, B and C there. I look forward to the work getting underway and being able to freely access many of our great cycle routes without risking breaking my ankles every time I go through one of those barriers. Okay, thank you very much. Thank you all. Okay. So next on my agenda, I have agenda item number 6. Which is the Bishopthorpe Bridge options. So again, James, I'll be over to you.
Thank you, Chair. So as you will doubtless remember, back in last year, we put in a weight restriction in October last year in response to an initial bridge structural survey, which found that the bridge couldn't take the normal road weight restrictions. Since that time, we've done considerable work in terms of options which are laid out in the report before you. We have worked with legal because the bridge, as an update since the report was published, I can confirm the bridge is owned by Sustrans, but it's obviously our highway passing over it. So there is still some legal work to do, but we are on with that, and I expect that to conclude relatively quickly. What we will need to do is decide what options we take going forward. The engineers are still working on the extent to which bridge strengthening is needed so that we don't do more than we need to. So that's why we've set out the options before you in the report. We're aware of the impact on Cotmanthorpe and have, as you know, met with ward councillors from both Cotmanthorpe and Bishopthorpe to talk about the issues that are raised, and the team are aware of those and looking at further mitigations that can be made. Part of the purpose of bringing this report to you today to give some delegations to me is so that we can progress at speed once decisions are made, and we don't have to wait for a decision session to come back before we proceed down the route to resolving the substantive issue.
Okay, thank you, James. Sorry,
I should say I've got Sia here if there are any very technical questions which are beyond me, or minor technical questions which are beyond me.
Okay, all right, thanks. And thanks for that, and thanks for the work that's been done. Councillor Stewart, I will put you out of your suspense. I will be recommending option 5, which is strengthening the bridge. But I just do have a couple of questions, because I think there is some confusion arising from the report about what we mean by ownership of the bridge. So can you just clarify for us? So Sustrans own the structure, but we own the road that goes over it. What are the implications for that in terms of any potential delays to the work commencing?
So the bridge, we are fairly certain is owned by Sustrans, and I think they acknowledge that. Under normal circumstances, that would mean the bridge owner was responsible for repairing the bridge. At the moment, Sustrans, like everybody, are struggling financially and not sure that they can afford to undertake these works. And a weight restriction is a way of dealing with a substandard bridge. So their argument would be put a weight restriction on. So we're trying to work through those challenges. As I say, that's a legal discussion at the moment, so I don't want to prejudice those legal discussions, but I am hoping that those legal discussions will conclude within the next sort of 4 weeks so that we can proceed as quickly as possible.
Okay, so in order to get a resolution, yeah, we need to, yeah, because obviously they could just say, well, don't run lorries over it, and that would be the worst of all worlds for everybody, I think. So in order to get a resolution, we need to find a legal way through with them so that we can allow the works to happen, and hopefully that will be within the next few weeks.
Yeah.
Right. Okay. And also, there's been a suggestion today, so I don't expect you to respond to this today, but I think it's worth looking at about a one-way weight limit, so that we can ensure that there were never two. Because essentially, if we get 2 heavy goods vehicles going over the bridge at the same time, it could collapse, and that's obviously not a situation that we can tolerate. So, the suggestion of a one-way weight limit has been put today, and I think the team maybe needs to take that away and have a look at it. And I also have another question that you may or may not be able to answer. Why the hell are temporary traffic lights so expensive? Like 150 to 200,000 pounds. It'd be cheaper to have somebody stood there with a lollipop. What? Why? Anybody know?
Yeah, I can. Well, it is expensive, unfortunately. You're talking about between 500 to 600. That is without man operating it. If you're going to have a man there, and obviously, if has to be a site visit by the suppliers to make sure it's working. If it breaks down, if you want the people, so even talking more than £600 a day, councillor.
A day.
Yeah.
God, we're in the wrong business, aren't we? £600 a day.
Yes.
God, that's a potential job creation scheme there, I think, for the people of Cotmanthorpe. Okay, all right, okay. So happy to support the recommendations on page 188, paragraph 19, 1 to 4, and obviously you know, to the people of Cotmanthorpe, we hear you. I think we can do whatever mitigations we can put in place to afford, but the best solution to this is to get that bridge strengthened as quickly as possible and get the traffic going the way it used to. I think that the location of businesses that require really very heavy goods vehicles in rural areas trundling through villages is something that I think would need to be looked at. But I think the only way that that could be looked at really will be on a national level. Well, certainly on a, you know, we'll see what the morality brings in terms of powers over planning, etc. Because essentially, you know, the businesses are allowed to operate wherever they choose to operate. But that does have serious implications for people living in small villages that were designed to take horses and carts, not 20-ton plus vehicles trundling through them. So I'm not sure there's a lot that we as a local authority can do that other than put it on the radar, maybe put it on the radar of the incoming mayor, whoever they are. And maybe it's something that we could, maybe that's a national issue that we need to start thinking about. It's a tricky one though, isn't it? You know, because clearly the land next to dual carriageways, etc., is going to be more expensive than farmland in near Acastor Malbis. So, okay, all right. So thank you for team. Thank you for all the work that you're doing on it, and let's hope we can expedite this as quickly as possible. Okay. So moving on to agenda item number 7, which is the response to the petition to pedestrianise Fossgate. And James, I'll hand over to you, and then whoever's picking this one up as well.
Yeah, I'll just do a very quick introduction. So obviously this is an issue that has challenged previous administrations as well as this administration about trying to find the right solution for Fossgate, and it was refurbished 5 years ago, I think, from memory. So the report sets out a lot of the work that has been done previously, and public speakers have obviously talked very eloquently about the challenges around that and trying to find the right solution. I think the only thing I'd just draw out from the report before I pass to Helen is the recommendation that we review this in the context of the local transport strategy, and that will help shape future decisions on Fossgate. So what your decision today isn't necessarily saying no forever. This is a live issue that will not go away, I think. So I think officers are certainly aware of that. Helen?
My name is Helen Versler. I'm the head of Highway Access and Development for City of York Council. Key points from the petition in the report, and then addressing some of the comments made today. So the current restrictions are no motor vehicles except for access between 8 a.m. and 6 p.m. And obviously we've done traffic surveys and it's proving quite successful. The maximum number of vehicles on the street during the 12-hour period when we did the surveys in 22 was 176 vehicles. So if you think over a 12-hour period, that's actually not very many vehicles per hour. But obviously we're conscious that there are still vehicles using it, and some of these are businesses accessing their own premises, customers of these businesses, taxis dropping people off, blue badge holders. And so in terms of what the petition was asking for, they were asking for pavement cafe capacity on the street. And as the report explains, we can't put tables and chairs permanently on the road because emergency access is required. We can't put them permanently on the footways because we need at least 1.5 meters on footways for people with mobility aids to be able to get past, and also people with push chairs. Could we remove the curbs? Well, at the moment, that's not the recommended option through government guidance, really, both in terms of shared space between pedestrians and vehicles are not recommended, but also cyclists and pedestrians. And we know there are a lot of cyclists on Fossgate. The survey has shown that. And so that would have an impact on groups with protected characteristics, people with disabilities, young people, children. And then finally, I do accept that the air quality point wasn't addressed. And that's mainly because of such a low number of vehicles that the surveys have shown. So the air quality issue on Fossgate itself is not really significant at this point because of the low number of vehicles currently on the street.
Great, thanks, Len, and thanks, James. And again, thanks for all the work that's gone into this report. I just want to make it clear from the outset that this is my decision. This is not something that officers force upon anybody. The officers have worked diligently on this report, and I thank them for the work that they have done. And this rests entirely with me, the way that we take this forward. And also, you know, I should declare slight interest in that many years ago, I worked for a business on Fossgate. Obviously, there's no sort of prejudicial or pecuniary interest there, but there is an interest in that I have a really good understanding of how the street works. And I also want to say from the outset that we share the desire to extend foot streets to areas like Fossgate. It's definitely something that we would like to see happen. However, we don't just progress with that regardless of the consequences. And what the both consultation has shown is that while there is a great deal of demand for Fossgate to be pedestrianised, there are also people living and undertaking businesses on the street who are not so keen for that to happen because of the implications that it would have for them. And I think we need to work through those implications before we could take this any further. There's also a very real technical difficulty with partially pedestrianising Fossgate, in terms of we'd have to then turn vehicles around so that they could get out the street during the foot street hours. And currently, the City of York Council is not in control of enough highway to be able to expedite that safely. And that is something that I think I'll be recommending that we look into going forward. I think in terms of some of the other issues that were raised, it's on a street like Fossgate, it's always going to be difficult to have pavement cafes simply because of the width of the street. And currently, in terms of emergency vehicles, etc., that will be prohibited. I think we probably need to do some more work as to how emergency vehicles could access if needs be. So at the moment, when Fossgate was closed for those community events that we had talked about, that sounded great, and I went to quite a few of them, and they were really great. At the moment, that can happen because there are marshals in place and they can clear the street should any emergency vehicles need to get down. I know, and again, another sort of interest here, I used to be one of the organisers of the Bishop Road Street parties, and that is something that we used to do once or twice a year. I see there's another Bishop Road Street party coming up soon, which will be great to go to. What I would suggest is that what we did, and I'm not sure what the options are like now, but what we did at that time is that when we put in for road closures, we put in for 12, so we'd put in for one a month over the period of a year, and the price was pretty much the same as putting in for one. I'm not sure if that's still the same, but it then gives you that flexibility to have those road closures in place whenever you want. Once you've got your system in place for doing that, which I'm sure the Fossgate traders know already, it becomes easier to do. And then those road closures close the road to everything. So that's including cycle movements. And that means that you can spill out and use the whole of the street. And I think that, you know, I don't think it's a SOP, as was said by one of the speakers. I think that's a very viable option for the traders to take forward and to create that brilliant atmosphere that existed on Fossgate while when those events were going on. So I think the questions regarding levelling off the roadway have been answered. We wouldn't be allowed to do that at the moment. There's a moratorium on that from the government because of the delineation that's needed to keep vulnerable road users safe. I fully support all of the comments from Anthony Brennan. The question is how you can make that happen really in a way that's safe and accessible for people. And as James has said, this is not the end of the road for Fossgate. It's certainly something that we will want to address going forward. So, and I think we also do need to see this, as James has said, in the context of the local transport strategy that's being developed, and also in the light of council policy, which has been policy since 2019, which is to stop all unnecessary vehicle movements through the city centre. We are an administration that is going to do something about that council policy rather than let it sit on a shelf for 4 years. And some of those actions will have implications for streets like Fossgate. Obviously, we don't know what that's going to be yet because we're still compiling all the results from the local transport strategy survey. But people are what is coming through is people have got a strong desire for more sustainable travel, for cleaner air, for more efficient ways of getting around the city, and that is the direction of travel. So I understand that everybody who signed the petition will be disappointed that we've not been able to achieve what that petition wanted at this point in time, but it is certainly not the end of the story as far as Fossgate is concerned. So I am happy to support the recommendations that we've got on page 219. And that also includes option E, so taking a market day approach, which will allow that street to be freed up for festivals, etc. Also, option F, to look at what we can do to enable vehicles to turn around at the bridge end of the street, so that potentially we can look at extending the foot streets further down the line. And happy to continue to work with the traders and residents of Fossgate to get to a point that makes it better for everybody. I mean, there have been improvements over the last sort of 5-6 years since the change to traffic flow happened. We do still get vehicles using it as a cut through instead of the access which it's supposed to be, but I think we've already referred to the habits of some drivers here today that could simply have to be described as antisocial behaviour, really. And I think to tackle that in the long run, we'll need to look at how vehicles move around the whole of the city. So happy to support the recommendations as laid out in the report, and happy to continue to take this work further on. And I think that covered all of the issues. Oh, there was an issue, yeah, the cleaner air issue. For sure wasn't picked up. It's something that we are conscious of throughout the city. We're doing a great deal of work with residents and businesses on Gillygate on this particular issue, and it is something that we can pick up. But I'm not sure if it's been identified as an issue in our air monitoring at all. And in terms of the impact on business rates, then obviously we all want to see Fossgate to be a thriving street. But I think the levels of occupancy are quite high on that street. I don't think there's many vacancies that last for very long as it stands already. So it's in a healthy place. We need to make it healthier. I do understand the increased costs that businesses have had, and we will do all that we can to help those businesses expand their trade. But we do have to work within the technical limitations that we face and the legislation. Okay, all right. So with that, I think that is the last piece of business on the agenda today. So thanks again to the team for the work on this, and thank you everybody for your contributions today. And at that point, I have no urgent business that's been brought to my attention, so I'll call the meeting to a close. Thank you.